Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Back with us today is meteorologist Greg Soulje, and Greg is back with a longer-term forecast. We've had a couple short forecasts in the last couple of weeks, but here we're going to take a longer look at the remainder of the winter as well as
Yes.
first look at the spring forecast. I'm excited about that spring forecast. So welcome.
No. Oh, don't be. I'm here to just, although I should say it'll get better at some point, but we'll talk about that later on in the
Oh
call.
gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
For those of you that are joining us, you can post your questions there in the chat on your screen, or if you're joining from social media, be sure to post your questions directly in those channels. I know you're going to start off with some headlines, but let's get going on the wildfires. Just a real quick little thing. What is going on there? That is just crazy.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second here when we get into the Western highlights, and that's really going to be a story that's going to be ongoing and really no sign of it completely, totally winding down. For folks who have watched this broadcast and the broadcast on This Week in Agribusiness or heard us on radio, we've been talking about that El Nino years transitioning to La Nina setups. You don't usually get a lot of moisture in the central and southern Sierra ranges, the mountains of the Southwest. They've had a couple of systems, and then it's just generally typically drier than usual. So they're back in drought mode. You throw 70-mile-an-hour winds,
Yeah.
and you warm it up, and you're off to the races with fires that are going to ebb and flow there. Same with the wind pattern, but a complete total breakdown in getting moisture in, probably not foreseen here for weeks to come. Weeks to come. So we'll talk about that here as we go through the broadcast. But in the meantime, here across the Corn Belt, cold weather. We had readings down below zero on this mid-January day as far south as, just about I-70. Parts of the Wabash Valley were down around 14, 15 degrees below zero. Example of clear sky, light wind, fresh snow cover, or old snow cover on the ground. And that's just a little piece of the mother lode of Arctic air that is still yet to come southward. We're going to see probably the season's coldest air still materialize at some point by the time we get to about the 21st to 24th or so of the month of January. Plain States areas, pretty good range in temperatures, and that is usually, again, a trip off of this weather pattern that features dryness in the Southwest, Arctic air across the plains. You get some locales across parts of the snow cover where it's been kind of lacking, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. Although as a whole, I believe it's about 57% of the nation does have snow cover, and that's pretty much on target and almost what we've experienced last year. We'll take a look at that coming on up. But in any event, at least there's been some degree of snow cover to protect some of the winter wheat fields of the central and southern plains with some of the worst of the cold air. And the cold air has been making headlines across the Dixie and will continue to do so in the next 7 to 10 days with not only cold weather, frost and freeze. It's made it all the way down to Mickey's Place, north end of South Texas Citrus, but there's signs of another winter storm mid to late next week over the deep south and southeast. I think our maps and charts may begin to point towards that, but otherwise it's just kind of a forecast thing that we're seeing materialize from the Delta into the southern mid-Atlantic region. And here is the western highlights with still this elevated wildfire threat that will vary from elevated to what at least when the National Weather Service comes out with their warnings. And they'll use this terminology in the Midwest of the plains when we talk about severe weather, thunderstorms and a tornado outbreak. They'll call it a PDS, particularly dangerous situation. Well, they've used that vernacular to describe the weather conditions and the firestorm threat, if you will, into the Sierra range, southern Sierra, the Santa Ana, and Southern California. So today, only 60-mile-an-hour winds when they've been clocked at 75 and higher. So the fire situation continues there. At times, the winds will back off. At times, they'll crank back up. There's really no weather systems. And this time of the year, there should be something coming across the West. We had it for a few weeks here a few weeks ago, and then nothing after that. So the story is going to continue to play out here, and there's just nothing in the weeks to come, if not longer, of significant moisture into the valleys, southern valleys and southern sections of California. So that's going to be an ongoing headline for whatever reason there, Sarah, and through Southern California for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely not the best news for that. I mean, I even saw, I think it was a fire tornado in the midst of
That's
all of
right.
that, which was really
That's right.
crazy.
You get the swirling. It's the same principle of heat and convection, swirling winds through the mountain passes, and you can do the same thing. Same principle that lies into when you get these little dust storms and dust devils in the desert Southwest. The same thing can deal and happen in fire situations. And just imagine you're picking those embers up, moving them down a mile or two, and that's why you just can't keep up with it. You just cannot
Yep.
keep up with it when it's in that most severe mode.
Exactly. So what's going on? I think you usually have your spaghetti maps next.
Well, let's take
Oh,
a
we're going to go into the drought. Let's
Yeah,
do
I know
drought.
it's
Okay.
January. I know there's snow on the ground, but the snow on the ground means moisture in the ground at some point. And here we are, before the cold came in and before the snow came in, we did have some significant rains that made their way through the central and southern corn belt. Luckily, harvest was wrapped up. It was an accelerated harvest season. And some of those rains did notch down some of the dryness and drought in southern Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and of all places, Ohio, where they just couldn't buy a drop of rain when they needed it. Here comes December and it rains like gangbusters. So go figure. Anyway, Michigan, Wisconsin, the upper Midwest is a little short on the snow. They had some earlier on in the season. The worst of the ongoing dryness and drought through Big Sky country, those downslope Chinook winds eat away the snowpack and snow cover and the moisture to the ground down to the Black Hills and Nebraska Panhandle. A nice corridor of improvement, Colorado, New Mexico, and it just turns horrid again. West Texas, cotton and cattle country, down south and west of San Antonio and across the southwestern states. That's kind of a regional look, but that will be worsting, Sarah, as we move on through the next couple of weeks with probably those hues of oranges and reds and browns indicating moderate to extreme to just exceptional drought going on in the Southwest. I think that's going to be an ongoing headline. The same colors that you see in West Texas, same colors are going to begin to materialize over areas of Southern California. Just a quick update, the Weather Service thinking there will continue to be, and we do have a couple of storms we got to keep an eye out for as we move through the remainder of the month of January for some ongoing dryness and drought improvement into the southern Great Lakes region, parts of the northern divide. Otherwise, pretty much status quo on dryness and drought for the next couple of weeks for the month of January. And then as we move through the seasonal outlook there, it is, and again, expectations that as we go through the end of February and into March, there'll be additional drought improvement. Well, at least from the degree of cold it'll be laying out, that will be varying. We seem to think that as we get deeper into wintertime, there'll be deeper in the way of snowpack and snow cover that livestock folks are going to have to contend with over the Corn Belt areas in particular, and at least some moisture gain as well through the Delta and Mid-Atlantic region. Again, there it is, Sarah, and no squabbling from this weather office on the worsening dryness and drought across the Southwest, including California and Arizona. Again, that's going to be a story that just goes on, and water shortages, water deviation, shutdown, the politics of it all are just going to get ramped up in the language here for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it doesn't, there's always those areas that need that moisture, and we always hope that they get that. So
Yeah, I know I've a couple of contacts with some producer friends out there, and they start talking about approaching farming and livestock operations with water rationing and a certain quota that you get every other day of the week or whatever. And I just don't know how they deal with that out there and the politics of it all when your lifeblood, your ability to exist, and from a business standpoint is in your farming and ranching operations out there. So pretty tough out there.
exactly. Yep, exactly. All right. So what else you got?
Well, squiggly lines. Here you go.
There we
This
go.
is there. You were looking for them, and here let's take a look here in the next 5 days. And yeah, there's a lot of lines on there, and they are really compacted. Means two things: cold air is on the move, and anytime you just get those winds really tight and compact, just for our purposes here, that's a lot of wind. And when there's a lot of wind, Mother Nature and the atmosphere is just trying to balance things out as best you can, and that's weather. And until you can do that process, well, if it ever happens, we're in trouble. But that's what weather is, just trying to balance and equate and warmth versus cold. And there's a lot of cold, and you see that low that's swirling its way up where it should be. That's the polar vortex. Nothing unusual. That is normal nomenclature. It's been there since day one in the meteorology books. It just sometimes builds southward through the Great Lakes region and this St. Lawrence River Valley. It will be kind of moving back northward where it ought to be, but boy, the steering weather-bearing currents, if you just kind of trace one, let's say out of Western Canada, you'll move it into the Central Plains and you'll slingshot it through the east and northeastern part of the country. So it's a pretty busy, active weather pattern. No big moving U-shape configurations, and that would mean storminess, but a series of disturbances on the move. So it stays cold and frequent, probably snow through the northern and central plains and the Corn Belt. I don't think any of these systems would be big until late next week. Like I said, probably out about 7-8 days from now, so around the 22nd or 23rd. Here's a pretty good example, the best we could probably come up with for how Santa Ana conditions play out. You see these highs over the western part of Canada. Here's one building out of Montana, the Western Dakotas, dropping down to about Salt Lake City. And meteorology books, anytime you talk about Santa Ana and the offshore flow, that's the landmark that you look for. And then you see a kind of at times lows that form up over the Rio Grande. You can see a couple of down through northwestern Mexico. These were the trough, the U-shaped winds bend back across the southern plains, Ohio Valley, and eastern states. So you get two things going on. You get a strong high in that clockwise flow, and then you get a low of any magnitude, and sometimes it's a significant one. That low has a counterclockwise flow. So you're marrying up two wind fields, and you're rushing them down off the southern Sierra and then down the Santa Ana ranges into Southern California. It is the perfect firestorm when it does materialize. It's the perfect firestorm when you have this ongoing dryness and drought. I believe since mid-May, 15th or 16th of May, just 1/1600ths of an inch of rain has fallen at the rain gauge site, at least at the LAX airport out there. So that's a pattern that continues on. Meanwhile, for the rest of the country, just cold and cold. And you see a lot of these wind and the isobars coming out of the Canadian prairie. They behave like warm fronts. I hate using the term when I see the local or anybody talk about in wintertime, windy and warmer. No, it's not. You put wind chill into play and it's not feeling any warmer. So at least temps moderate each time these wind fields pick on up. But there's a system, you can kind of see a little boundary, a front or so, something cooking as far south as Yucatan, the northern Gulf of Mexico. I think that's the system that comes out later next week to impact the southern states and mid-Atlantic region. So enough of that, including my commentary. That is the general snowpack and snow cover across the country as of this 15th of January. Here is a snapshot of snow cover 1 year ago today. Pretty interesting. So we had snow into northeastern Texas on the ground, Tennessee Valley, lower Mississippi Valley. Look at the deeper shades of significant snow on the ground. That would have been between about maybe 5 and 8 to 10 inches of snow out of eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and into Michigan. So you want to compare how it was a year ago? There's the 15th of January. Today, pretty close over parts of the central and southern Corn Belt. A couple of days ago, we had snow all the way down to Texas, northern Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. The snow, again, is lacking through Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Then it picks up near the Canadian border. You can see all the snowpack and snow cover over the northern and central Rockies and the Sierra, northern and central Sierra through California, but nothing in the mountains of the southwest through Arizona and parts of Nevada and New Mexico and Utah. So problems continue to play out there. So with that in mind, here's the piece for the next 24 hours. Pretty quiet. Gulf Coast, a little snow and do the Great Lakes region. Next 7 days, the more significant moisture. Again, this is out about probably next Thursday or Friday. That would be the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of January in the southeastern states. Will be a snow system for the I-70 corridor and the Great Lakes region, and maybe a little more snow into the northern and central sections of the Rockies, Sarah.
Yeah, we all lit up on that one. We all head to Atlanta to the poultry show here at the end of the month. So hopefully we don't want any ice storms or snowstorms down in Atlanta, because that just shuts us right down. So.
Well, they had that just maybe 4 or 5 days ago. They had 3 inches at Atlanta, 5 at Birmingham, 7 to 9 at Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm sure you'll get some horror stories down there. You give a few tips on how to drive here through the Midwest. But I think by the time we get to hopefully the poultry show, things will have improved. But this will be towards about a week from now. So about the 22nd, 23rd before your show down there in Atlanta. That's probably maybe a snow rain going over the rain system this time in Atlanta, Georgia. But snow for Tennessee, Kentucky, and all the way out to about the I-70 corridor of Illinois and Indiana. So that's the priest of the next 7 days. And this is just that's just cold air. That's it. That's how far reaching these cold waves are going to be dominating as far west as the divide into the western Great Lakes region through the 21st. And then there's more frost and freeze as well developing in the Delta, lower Mississippi Valley. The cold was going to be pretty much far reaching here for the foreseeable future. So on to the government fed, kind of the modeled forecast, because I just keep an eye on it, and I kind of like to see how the upper level winds play out. That's the way we forecast back in the Euro Finkel days, where you had a certain pressure chart at about 25, what we call a 500 millibar chart. Use that, and then you took a map that plotted out current surface weather with the fronts and lows and highs and all that. That's the way we forecast. We just kind of move things along on how the upper pattern played out. And if you did that kind of forecast and another level charted around 5,000 feet, which we'd use to forecast temperatures, it's all we needed back then. And we did a pretty good job at it, at forecasting weather. And that was, you make one forecast for the nation, you've made a forecast essentially for everywhere in the nation. So that's why we like the green squiggly lines. Sorry about that. In any event, here's the trough, that U-shaped bending from the Great Lakes all the way down to Texas. So there's cold air, a lot of it for the plains and into the eastern states, that hooched up ridge, if you will, over the western part of the country. That's a lot of sinking air, and that means there's high pressure at Salt Lake City. And so as far out as the 24th of January, we think there's still ongoing problems in Southern California. A little sliver of above average temperatures there. Otherwise, we're locked into the cold all the way down to South Texas. Citrus, livestock managers, bin and barn operators are on notice for another round of cold through just about the end part of the month, and moving into Dixie as well. But at least along the Gulf Coast, it's primarily rain there. It is a quieter weather picture for now across the heartland. So what snow you got on the ground, maybe you get a little skiff or short inch on it. That's about it. And most of the organized snows are up through Montana, the western Dakotas, and parts of Big Sky country. Out for the next 2 weeks, very little change. I think what's going to go on here, and it'll be tough to describe in words, but that U-shaped, that dip in the jet stream from the Great Lakes to the regions of Texas and the Delta, we think with time, it's actually going to begin to back up. So that big hole, that low, that's opening through southeastern Canada, retrogresses as we call it, that sets up more of a southwest wind flow. Cold air is aloft as well. So that's the thinking, that as we get deeper into the remainder of winter and early spring, we got to deal with this. And sometimes it means a pretty busy weather pattern and not a lot of warm air to work with by any means for the rest of the wintertime season, at least. Government thinks here as we move through the next, there we go, 14 days. Still cold air, no big warm up, no moderation, sub-average temperatures. If you see highs normally in the teens, well, you're going to be in the single digits and low teens. If you expect 20s and low 30s, probably upper teens and 20s. That's it. And you can just translate on southward based on averages of readings. It'll be about 5 to 10 degrees below average. And the moisture comes back into play as we get that retrogression. Winds come around into the southwest. The trough backs up. And so you're going to get a mixture of nonsense in the Missouri, southern Illinois, more rain through the Delta region, some snow for the northern and central plains, and every reason to think that's going to build northward as we move through the rest of the month of January. And probably, Sarah, maybe a little rain snow mix at Atlanta, but I think generally leaning towards rain there as you get down there at the end part of the month, but not far away from some of that winter precip. So you can go down there saying you've been up to date. You guys have been briefed, and you'll be dressed accordingly to the T's for whatever comes down out there.
There we go. We'll know what to pack.
There you go.
So hopefully we're looking towards the end of winter here. What do you have in store for us?
Okay, we've updated things just a little bit and really making the cold air dominant as we move through the remainder of the month of January. No big surprise. Polar vortex is there. Pieces of disturbances rotate southward. The coldest air through the Great Lakes region. Again, between 4 and 8 degrees below average. Temps will tend to vary in the southern part of the country because you'll be ebbing and flowing in and out of the cold air. Normal temperatures across the western reaches of the country. There it is, below average moisture in the southwest, West Texas. The drought areas get droughtier, if that's possible. Below average moisture for the Gulf Coast, and it's an active storm track that gets going. Remember that upper circulation through the southeastern Canada signs it's going to back up and retrograde, and that lays the foundation, I think, for the thinking going forward for the remainder of the wintertime season. No shortage of snow. If you got little, if any, on the ground, don't worry. The snowplow guys will get their business in here for the remainder of January and going beyond from there. Here's the February outlook, and generally colder than average. The warm spike tries to make its way into areas of the Northeast and New England, down through the southeastern states as well, and the temperatures about normal over the Southwest. So this blob of cold just kind of spins its way back and forth over the southern Canadian prairie and just kind of sits up and sets up shop there. And this is the story. No moisture for California or the desert Southwest or West Texas and the Rio Grande. Below average moisture down through Florida, normal to a little above, as maybe some folks try to walk the fields of the deep south part of the country, thinking of what they're going to do in the Delta region for the upcoming spring planting season. No shortage of snowfall for probably a good part of the northern and central plains, northern and central Corn Belt into the northeast of New England, and a little more snow back into the northern Rockies. So essentially, that pattern shift gets locked in and stays that way. Don't think there's any major storms, at least a plethora of these things, but a frequency of systems that will be coming through that will keep you on your toes and the plow guys going at it here for the foreseeable future for the month of February. And into March, that cold air is probably going to retrograde as far west as Saskatoon, maybe Edmonton, Winnipeg, that area, and north and west of Thunder Bay. So that's sub-zero at night still into March with a bunch of snow on the ground through Montana and the Dakotas finally by then. And anytime you get this proximity of warm versus cold or above versus below, there's just no shortage of weather systems coming through in varying strengths and intensities. This is definitely not a dry weather pattern whatsoever going forward for the remainder of wintertime and into springtime. So that's the winter outlook, Sarah. We'll pick up the snows. The colder air is pretty much dominant. A little variation into the southern Corn Belt, southern plains, but the story looks to be pretty busy and active across the heartland going on forward.
Spring. What about spring?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, there's that priest. I forgot. I do this on a TV show. I'll forget where I'm at. We'll have to cut things, and start
Here we
all
just
over.
go live. We're just like, hey, give us one more slide.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry about that. I do it all
worries.
the time in TV when we're putting the show together. Lose my train of thought. Anyway, there's the moisture pattern for March. Snow in the Pacific Northwest, northern and central Rockies. Snow systems for the northern and central Corn Belt. You get into this time of the year, you got a very sharp delineation between wet weather and snowy weather, and probably some severe weather potential getting going in the southeastern plains and Valley, and little, if any, moisture again in the southwestern part of the country. That's the panel I was looking for, Sarah. So we'll go forward here. We'll just keep it going
keep it going. Sorry about that.
Yes, spring outlook. Here it is. And for the most part, it is this scenario. So the cold air expected this could be a short, compact, short-lived La Nina setup. Pretty moderate in intensity, but short-lived. It'll back off quickly as we get out of springtime. But once again, as you get through this transition out of winter into springtime and La Nina is into play, weather tends to be pretty active and busy. So there's warmth. That summer-like warmth through the Delta, southeastern states will get spikes of that. Would you believe, coming off the recurrent frost and freezes? I believe parts of Tennessee were down below zero as well, or close to it the past few mornings. Single digits as well into parts of the northern Delta and into parts of northern Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. In any event, big turnaround in temperature readings there. The precip pattern is more normalized, so normal planting operations, normal planting days, along with the warmth. Boy, I would suspect things are going to be hopping and popping in the southeastern states from a fieldwork standpoint. Still dry as a bone into Texas, cattle country. Warm, as we talked about, on temperatures, and still little, if any, moisture into the southern reaches of California. There will be late season snows to the Pacific Northwest, northern and eastern Corn Belt, a little more rain in the Ohio Valley, and a mixed bag of moisture into the Northeast and New England. So some opportunity in some areas of the Corn Belt and Eastern Plains for a little early season field work. And temperatures are returning back to normal by the time we get to mid-spring. Mid-spring by our definition here, probably the ramping up of field work late April into May. Looks pretty positive from a tempo standpoint. Warmth is getting going back west of the Missouri. Things are coming out of the ground lickety split over the deep south, Texas, Delta region, southeastern states. The lingering cold air is retrograding back north and eastward this time. And you know how you can see the jet stream pattern beginning to move northward as well into the southern Great Lakes region. And that sets the stage here for a moisture pattern mid-spring, it's still kind of busy. So especially Twin Cities to Milwaukee to Detroit, roughly either side of that line, a little more field work delay. But recall that the drought monitor, plus if we get some snow on the ground, plus this is actually a pretty decent setup. And it's at least normal moisture for the central and southern Corn Belt locales. But note how that expanding below area of moisture through the southwest and the southern plains is expanding. We think there's a hot ridge of high pressure. Folks who watch weather and understand weather, they know when we start talking about the warm ridge, the hot ridge, and what it can do, particularly as we get into summertime around here. Anyway, the late spring outlook, which takes us through probably late May, mid to late May into the first week of June, right before we can move into this summertime season. There is the hot ridge. That is quite a dramatic shift around. That's why we think this is going to be a rapid demise of La Nina. Things take on a more normal scenario. And then anything after La Nina, you kind of get these extremes going. So heat is into play. Would you believe? Oklahoma, Texas, northward to the Black Hills and west from there, warped across the entire Corn Belt locales. And we think this is probably the start. And I don't think we did anything where we might have on one edition, the New Year's edition of This Week in Agribusiness, talked about the summer outlook. But in any event, storm clusters, those ridge riding thunderstorms are in out of the Dakotas, the upper Midwest, far eastern Corn Belt locales. If you wanted an area, Sarah, if you were going to go into some sense of maybe replanting or some field work delays the springtime season, is probably the northern and eastern Corn Belt, and that may be almost a wetter scenario. While this year, expectations of dryness continue to mount, maybe the D word into parts of the western and southern Corn Belt locales. So that's the early thinking that I think most everyone except northern and eastern Corn Belt are going to be in good shape from a planning standpoint. Northern and eastern areas probably a little too wet, a little bit too late in the season. Maybe a couple of spots that need to be replanting. And again, everyone from southwest and northeast gets a little drier than we'd like to see going to summertime, and maybe some drought-related issues in the western and southern Corn Belt and parts of the Great Plains as we get deeper on into summertime. That is the current thinking for now.
Very good. Yeah, lots to talk about, lots to think about, lots to follow. So a little more winter left, it sounds like. We're going to get some more and some of this cold that we kind of seem to be moderating a little, but now it's going to be coming back. So
I like winter here. This coming. I don't mind winter. I don't mind winter, but I want big winter storm, something to talk about on, if I'm going to do winter, I want to do it big time, not any of this piddly stuff that comes on through them. But then again, after about, the 15th of January, I don't know if it's the crooked number in front of me that I get sick and tired of winter time. I'm ready for spring and summer to come back into play, but winter, winter certainly serves its purpose. So we'll keep you up to date here on This Week in Agribusiness. A lot of radio stations across the country on this podcast each and every month. And then Sarah and I get together once or twice a week, especially when my voice is better. And we talk about any headlines and kind of get you up to date on the week, both early into the week and later in the week. So you got us coming from all different directions here.
Yep, we're going to get you those updates as you need them, and just keep watching, and we'll let you know when those are coming. I think we're talking maybe Friday for this week here, right, Greg? Your voice is holding out.
Yes. Yeah, that's what happens when you hang around the little nieces at 5 and 9 years old and everything that goes into that. And then whatever is on the airplane coming back from out east over the holiday season. But it is what it is.
Exactly. And of course, Greg, every weekend on This Week in Agribusiness on RFD TV and another 120 affiliated stations. So lots of opportunities to find out what's going on. Well, Greg, we want to thank you, and we'll be catching up with you soon.
All right. Be good.
You too. Thank you all for joining us as well. We appreciate your time. For Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.